Italy was absolutely embarrassing in year 2024. In what was supposed to be their title defense, the Azzurri narrowly avoided elimination against a mediocre Croatian side, only to fall apart in the worst way possible against Switzerland in the round of 16. This disastrous performance has obviously left the entire football world with the impression that they're finished for good, so in this video we'll dive deep into the reasons why their Euro campaign was a massive failure, why they've been in a constant state of decline for the last 18 years, and in the end I'll give you my opinion on what their future might look like. First off, let's look at what went wrong in year 2024, because trust me, almost every national team would struggle if they had to face the same adversities that Italy did. The Italians couldn't count with Tonali, Berardi, Acerbi, Scalvini and Udogi due to injuries or suspensions, while time hasn't been too kind to many important figures in their recent history. In 2021, their attacking trio of Insigne, Immobile and Chiesa lit Europe on fire, but nowadays these guys spend more time in the nursing room than on the pitch. Everyone expected guys like Chiellini, Bonucci and Insigne to be the retired or playing a significantly less important role, but Chiesa was supposed to be their star, who would carry them back to the top of international football once again. However, he's been plagued by injuries, and when he's fit, he looks like a completely different player, much more irrational and with a bigger chip on his shoulder than ever before. He knows he needs to prove himself, but those insecurities will probably even cost him a place at Juve. In his last Euro tournament, he was actually one of the few that was still fighting for his country, with the other saving graces being Calafiore and Donnarumma. But then again, those were defensive players. There's not a single decent player in attack, and the only world-class midfielder was out of form during the entire tournament. Nevertheless, blaming the players can't be the only excuse. Sure, this is probably the worst Italian squad of all time, but time and time again we've seen much weaker sides from an individual point of view make it far in international tournaments. Spalletti has to take a big portion of the blame. He looked clueless most of the time and came into the tournament without a well-defined starting 11. He couldn't stick to one formation, he put his star out of position, and there was never a clear intent on trying to win a match. Even when playing against Albania, Italy just sat back and let their opponents attack. The only time we saw Italy fighting to win was in the last 15 minutes against Croatia. Even against Switzerland, on the brink of elimination, these guys were just strolling around. So as you can tell, the easy answer to their Rio 2024 flop is that they didn't have a good manager who can implement a system that worked, plus the players' apparent lack of individual quality. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Italy had the best league in the world in the 90s, and for a vast portion of football's history, they were the best European national team. You don't go from that to where they are right now out of nowhere. The first factor that influenced their downfall was their own economic crisis. In the early to mid-2000s, Italy's economy began to plummet, and many club owners stopped investing as much as they used to. Fiorentina, Napoli and Parma all went bankrupt, and historic sides like Roma, Lazio and Genoa also struggled to stay afloat. Then in 2006, while the Italians were celebrating their last World Cup triumph, their football took another massive hit: the Calciopoli scandal. Not only did Italy have to contend with fierce competition from the Premier League and La Liga, but the most successful club in Serie A was also relegated for match fixing. Juve would need 9 years until they could compete with the European elite once again, while AC Milan and Inter would continue at the top of the football pyramid, but after another hit by the economic crisis in 2008, their value would also decline, and during the 2010s, they were a complete joke, failing to compete in the majority of the Champions League editions of that decade. Again, investors could have looked into the massive fanbase many Italian clubs hold and still put money in the league, but the Calciopoli really tainted the image of the league for the foreign viewer. At the same time, the defensive football most Italian clubs used to opt for was also seen as a major eliminating factor for investment from markets such as the American or the Middle Eastern. This is basically why Serie A fell off, but honestly, Italy could have still thrived without a top league. I mean, look at Portugal, the Netherlands, Belgium. None of those countries currently hold a strong league, yet they've done pretty well for themselves in the last 20 years. However, there's a big difference between Italy and those countries. It's not that there aren't any Bellinghams or Yamals coming up every year, but Serie A clubs prefer to invest in cheaper foreign talent who can usually perform better in the short term than most young Italians. In a study made in November 2023, Italy had the 5th highest percentage of foreign players and the most among the top 5 leagues. 81% of Udinese's squad is composed of foreigners, while Salernitana, Genoa and Torino also make up the top 20 for the highest percentage of expatriates in the roster. That's a lot for a selling league. And even when there was talent, the federation squandered it. They rushed to give time to players that weren't good enough, such as Aquilani and Montolivo, when they should have kept Pirlo and Gattuso as important figures in 2008 and 2010. Plus, they decided to bet on guys like Giaquinta, Matri and Gilardino, when Quagliarella and Di Natale were much better viable options. But to be fair, Italy simply didn't have the raw talent to win titles like they did in the previous decades. Juve's success was the only thing keeping them from completely falling apart in the 2010s, and without trailblazing managers influencing their country's football, it would be impossible to thrive. Ultimately, Italian football is still mostly run by out-of-touch old people, but there are reasons to be hopeful for the future. Inter's ownership has re-established the club to a decent level after several good decisions in the transfer market, and proved that you can make smart business moves while also benefiting your own country at the same time. The country's under-17s also performed well in the latest Euros, with players like Francesco Camarda, Mattia Liberali and Federico Coletta being pivotal to their title conquest. That doesn't mean that Italy will be winning the 2030 World Cup, but they certainly have a greater chance of succeeding than if their youth teams were all struggling, don't you think? Either way, this decade will be a defining one for Italy. Many football giants can struggle for a while and then come back as if nothing had ever happened, but I've never seen a giant team have so many disappointing runs in the space of 2 decades and then return to their former glory. Maybe Italy is the next Uruguay or Hungary, once the best team in the world, now merely seen as an outsider or underdog in most tournaments. And that is it for the video. Do you think Italy will ever bounce back? Let me know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Throne FC and turn on post notifications so you never miss the most interesting football content on all of YouTube. Thanks for watching until the end, I appreciate you, and I will see you on the next one.